Hey, and welcome. Hey, guys. Welcome to the Coachlogik podcast. I'm your host, Max Aita. I'm joined today. I'm back in the U.S., and I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Joshua Giblets Gibson.
Yeah. I was thinking about this podcast maybe yesterday or earlier this morning, and like the introduction and the flow of it. And it's good to be back. It's good to be back. It's good to have you on the other end of the mic. We did one podcast while you were in Thailand and discussed like the first quarter of the World Cup. That's on the Philosophical Weightlifting podcast if people are interested. That was really cool, really insightful, and a really fun conversation. I think we wanted to extend that and talk about the rest of the meet, talk about the World Cup kind of in total, and then how that orients itself within the Olympic quad, and then what coaches can take away from that and learn from it.
Yeah, I think that's a great topic for today. I mean, I want to jump in and just kind of talk about the World Cup, talk about what I saw there, talk about maybe what I saw from a coaching perspective, an athlete perspective. There's a couple of specific things I want to just address as far as like different sessions or particular lifts. We saw 73 kilo A session, obviously. That's a big one. Maybe touch on Olivia and some of that stuff, and then kind of just give, my overall perspective on, how everything went. Before that, though, let's let everybody know about the different offerings we've got. So you've got remote coaching with myself, remote coaching with Josh Gibson. If anyone wants to get coached up properly and actually make some progress and go to big meets and do well, reach out to us. We're going to be launching the Coachlogik coaching platform. The plan is to launch this the week of nationals. So that's going to be like the second week of June, which is exciting. So we're going to hopefully get a booth, show up there, demo the product, showcase everything, get everyone on board, and show how cool it is, all the cool stuff we've been working on. So I'm super excited for that. But yeah, outside of that, we've just been plugging along. Josh, anything on your end that you've been doing?
I cut out a little bit.
Where'd I cut out?
At nationals. You're talking about nationals.
Oh, yeah. So we're gonna try to launch at nationals. I'm excited for that because we've been working really hard on it. All the developers are working on this. We've been doing this for about a year now, really just cranking as much as we can on it. We're finally getting to a point. I've been using the platform a tiny bit here and there, kind of just testing it. And we're going to have basically a beta launch with some coaches the next few weeks. And then at nationals, try to have like a full on, in-person launch. And then we'll do a bigger, broader, wide scale kind of push to get people going. But yeah, I'm very excited for it. I'm excited to get this thing going. But what kind of stuff you've been up to in the last few weeks, Josh?
Yeah. It feels like a lot. Just school stuff, kind of the semester's coming to a close. You have like different kind of benchmarks you have to do. So you have to create a plan of study, which is basically like your contract as a doctoral student. You have certain classes you have to do, you have certain timelines, and then you present that, you talk about why that makes sense within your professional goals and background. And then you have to get everyone to sign off. So I'm just kind of like putting the finishing touches on that. Coaching a lot, taking on a few new athletes, new weightlifters. So I've been working with them. Have a lot of people competing soon. So have a meet in Seattle that I'm actually going to go out to and coach at. Have a meet.
When's that?
I think that's the third weekend of May. So I want to say it's the 18th, 19th. Yeah, so I think I leave on the Thursday and I get back on a Monday. And then I have a meet in Dayton, Ohio that I'll be coaching at.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't actually know the dates, and hopefully it's not the same date. But and then nationals. I'll be at nationals. Just kind of chipping away. We have the Coachlogik mentorship group, and I'm putting a lot of time and work into that. Getting great guests, creating great content for that. We just had Hayden Pritchard on to talk about tapering and peaking. That was like his body of work as a sports scientist. So it was awesome to hear him riff on all things tapering and peaking for maximal strength. And yeah,
Give me I didn't have a chance to listen to that because I was probably flying over the Atlantic or the Pacific Ocean, but give me a quick 30-second rundown. Give me the cereal box version of what you learned about that. Something interesting, something, profound, something contradictory, change your opinion. How was it?
I think there are a few things you're going to think about when you're constructing a peak and a taper, and that's going to be the fitness fatigue model, which is you perform training, you undergo some sort of physical training, you create fitness, and you create fatigue. Fitness is performance. Fatigue is pretty much what would suppress performance because you're altering the machinery that produces movement. Maybe there's some psychological fatigue, but basically it's whatever's going to suppress performance. You have fatigue, which is performance, and then you have the training itself, which can influence those two factors. We're trying to, by tapering, maximize fitness by letting off fatigue. And that means having, training that actually is productive and specific enough to the sport to make progress. And then removing training in a way that's strategic and specific to the individual to allow them to feel fresh and perform well while not letting off on too much training to decrease fitness. So it's this fine balance of managing training volume and intensity to express, weightlifting performance on competition day. I think one thing that's really interesting is this idea of training cessation. So how many days you actually take off before meets. Everyone knows you can have a typical training block and hit big lifts, maybe even hit PRs, but it's like to actually peak, to actually taper and peak. How much training should you do and what's the structure of that training? And that's something we all kind of think about pretty deeply. Do you have a kind of go-to heuristic for tapering?
Yeah, I mean, I look at tapering as, same kind of like from the first principles perspective. It's like, the taper is something that it should be emergent from what preceded it. So it's like, well, if we were training a shitload of volume and going really hard and everything was really good, that taper needs to reflect our ability to decay that fatigue, right? So it's like, how fast does Josh recover from training? How much training have we done? So like we want to be in a spot where we get you to the competition, balancing both like maintaining a crisp tactile sense of the technique with heavy weights.
Yeah.
And that requires exposure to that kind of training. But at the same time, getting rid of as much of everything else as we can to bring you into the competition day with, the best possible chance to succeed, which in my experience generally revolves around you being maybe a little more rested than you would on any heavy day in training. Probably definitely more rested on that day, but again, not so much so that you feel too recovered in the sense that like you go out there and you just don't have a good feel for the lifts. So the heuristics I would usually use are like, there's a finite time point of like, what's the last heavy day of training? How far out is that? That's based on each individual, so some people it's going to be 4 days before, some people it's, 10 days before. And then, from that point on, it's just a matter of doing enough to stay as close to the technique of the lifts as we can, getting exposure to the sort of high intensity, maximum type lifts that we're going to need in training or sort of need to feel comfortable with in competition. And then, just getting rid of stuff we don't need to do. We're not going to do high volume squats and pulls and accessory work. But doesn't mean we're not going to do some heavy squats, just a little bit of high intensity, RPE 8 or 9 singles, here and there, 5 days out, 4 days out, high intensity, high RPE sort of no hook, no feet snatches and clean and jerks and, stuff like that I think allows us to train relatively hard, but not with heavy weights. And so you get a lot of that, kind of practice in.
Well, I think a major point there. And one thing you touched on So I went heavy for like the first time in what feels like forever in the classic lifts. And it's right. There's a certain feel you have to pick up on. There's like, it's like, oh, I haven't touched these weights. It's like, I also haven't like thought about, what kind of shape I'm in. So I don't even know where I'm like roughly going to be. So you start to think about like, okay, when I get into a good start position and I start to move the bar, like what does a maximal weight feel like? What does like my technique feel like? If you've done a bunch of work on the front end, it's like, what does it feel like on the back end when that starting to transfer over? So suddenly, the bar path's a little bit closer. You're moving more efficiently.
Yeah.
You're catching the bar in a slightly different spot. And it's like almost up. So in like behavior and like psychology, you would have like prior beliefs, and the prior beliefs would influence like the current situation. It's almost like you're updating your priors when you're going into a heavy training session for the first time, unless you've done those repeatedly week after week after week, and you've gone through some sort of like specific prep or comp prep. You almost don't know. You're trying to figure shit out, right? And it's like figuring out the process. You wouldn't want to do that at the end of a taper. It's not like, this is what a heavy lift feels like. No, it's like you need that familiarity. You need that comfort. So a lot of like good training builds you into that. So suddenly it's like, yeah, this is what a maximal single is like. And the only thing that it really is changing is the weight on the bar, but it's not how I move the weight necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's actually, I'll give you my real world taper that I gave to Shania Bedward at this competition. So, to kind of give a practical example for people, she went in as a 76 lifter. She needed to try and hit, the Olympics thing would have been like a massive 244 or something like that. But we went in basically with the idea that like she needs a certain total for a stipend. But her taper looked like, I want to say it was, we maxed out the snatch and clean and jerk before she left for Thailand. So about a week, 9 days out, a week, something like that. Just there's also travel, so it's like the last day she could go heavy, she did. Then she traveled for like 2 days, then got there, then recovered for 2 days, then had like a sort of go to openers day. And then that was about 5 to 6 days out. And then the last few days going into it, she did no hook, no feet snatches and no contact clean plus jerk. And all of that was basically designed to like keep her technique as tight as possible, as consistent as possible, and give her the sense of like, hey, you could go heavy and do a no hook, no feet up to 90 kilos or something, without it being like it probably felt more like 95 or 100, right? And she did pretty well. She struggled a little bit in the snatch, only made one snatch, but I think part of that is just like nerves and like being on a big stage, and you kind of just make a couple errors. Did 102 and then 132 in the clean and jerk, made 2 clean and jerks, and tried to clean 135 and actually made a good attempt at it. She's never even tried that before, which I thought was solid. Looked good on stage, but just, needs to get a little more experience in those bigger meets. But it worked well. It's like you could see that like visibly she was moving faster and strong, and looked like there was no fatigue, no residual fatigue sitting there in her on the stage, and did well. As far as like the actual lifts and making more lifts, like that's going to be a byproduct of just experience and skill and, all of those factors. So it's like, did the taper work? Yeah, it was a great taper. She came into competition with the least amount of fatigue and was in the best shape she could have been in. And then from there, it's just a matter of like, how capable are you of making lifts? Can you not make a mistake or do whatever?
Yeah. From her perspective, how was her feedback about how she felt and how she performed? Because just with like a taper, sometimes someone can lift really well and feel like shit. And sometimes someone can lift like shit and feel great. So what was her experience of that?
I asked her 3 different times how she felt, and she told me each time she felt really strong and really fast, which I thought was really good. That's what I want to hear, is that somebody feels better than you expect. That you don't want the answer of like, I feel okay, I feel a little bit tired, or I feel a little bit off, I feel weak. She was feeling better each session as we trained, as we got closer to the meet. And you could see it, like the speed came back, her movement quality was there. So it's like, that's kind of the perfect taper, even though the meet itself, like, she didn't like go 6 for 6. I think those two things are kind of disconnected. Like tapering and peaking is all about putting someone on the platform in the best physical shape you can be. Succeeding on the platform is, strategy, tactics, psychological preparation, technique, training. Like there's a lot more that goes into making each lift. But yeah, I mean, when athletes telling you they're feeling good, they're feeling faster, they're feeling stronger as they get closer to the day of competition, that's what you want. That's all you can ask for. That's the goal of a taper,
Yeah, and it's important to remember, like, we talk about open skill sports and closed skill sports, and that just denotes like the amount of environmental unpredictability. It's like, just because weightlifting seems sterile, it doesn't mean there aren't, a ton of aspects of it that aren't unpredictable. So I would say weightlifting, even though it's like you snatch, you clean and jerk, bar that spins, comp plates, like there's a lot of unpredictability. And there's a lot of stuff that like even internally you can't know. There's a lot of stuff externally you can't know. For example, Hunter at finals where the bar was like rolling off the platform every rep. It's like, you don't plan for that. So there's a part of it where it's like, you're exactly right. There's like the physiological taper, which is just like, can the machinery work as well as possible? And then there's the reality of that embedded in sport.
Yeah, literally. That's the best way to describe it, is that it's just like, it's two big components.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's good. I mean, that's kind of how I would taper. I think that's cool to hear that, the lecture and the mentorship group went well, that the taper talk and the peaking talk was good. I would say I kind of want to pivot a little bit and chat about what I saw at the World Cup. So like overall, the meet itself was extraordinary. Like we talked about this last time on your podcast, but really successful, a lot of big lifts, a lot of like great competition. Anyone that hasn't watched it, go check it out on Weightlifting House TV. You can probably find the same sessions all over YouTube, but like, basically there's some really good battles. The most notable sort of 3 or 4 events from the whole thing, obviously, like just kind of in no order, I would say Olivia Reeves in the 71s, just, I mean, she should be thrown in prison because she committed double murder. China and North Korea just absolutely obliterated them in a way that was like, not only did she just smash them with her numbers, but it was like a 6 for 6 day that looked like if she had 8 attempts, she'd have made 8 attempts. It was nuts. I mean, her 118 snatch was just so strong. It looked like that could have been an opening lift. It was just like she just crushed it. And then did the 150 clean and jerk, and it was like she fell back on her heels, then balanced again, then just stood right up and jerked it. So that was impressive. And that's like a very, hopefully a telling thing that will lead to like US lifters realizing, hey, we can really do damage. Like, we've had a few female world champions now. And so like that should be some kind of indicator that, hey, this is possible. So that was cool. That was awesome to watch. I think that was like one of the highlights of the whole meet. Kind of regardless of whether you're a US lifter or not, it was just cool to see. The other stuff that I think was majorly cool was the 89s was predictable. That was pretty obvious how it was going to end, but 2 world records back to back, that was cool to see. We haven't seen that for a long time. It's been a while since we saw this many world records. I think in total, 16 world records at this meet, which is big, which to me indicates like we're back,
Yeah.
The people have gotten back on the program, for whatever that is. I don't know. The 102s, Lee Huenhua doing like a, 413 total or whatever. I think 180, 233 or something. Wow. I mean, those are big numbers at 102. So yeah, I mean, big lifting there. The supers was pathetic. Not much of anything happened there. I think the biggest snatch was 205. or maybe Lalian did 212. I can't remember 210, which is not a bad snatch. It's huge,
Yeah.
but it was like without Lasha or Gore, it kind of felt like underwhelming. But yes, I mean overall, like those were good. I would say the most talked about session of the entire thing was the 73 kilo A session.
Yeah.
And did you watch it? Did you see it live?
I saw part of it. I was trying to actually. I was trying to play it at the high school. I was having media connectivity issues. I wanted to put that session on specifically because it looked like it was absolutely insane.
Yeah. So it was a pretty crazy session because Shi Jiang is like the old man who's like trying to fight his way through still. He was so inspiring and so much fun to watch. His performance in my mind was the kind of performance that gets you into weightlifting, where you're like, this dude is like fighting to hold on, but he's like a savage and he's like fighting hard as shit. And that was so cool to watch. He got third. Did you get third or second? I got second. And then you had this battle of like Rizki, Jinyan Sira, and Rahmat Abdullah. And it's like, you know, it's like the classic, I don't know how to describe it, like the underdog versus the sort of cocky guy in the lead. And I'm not saying any of these things in a negative way, but it's like, you know, many people I talked to a lot of people about how that performance went. And you had Rahmat doing not the entire quad, but largely, you know, treated the quad as, you know, his own personal kind of training session. You know, he went to Bogota Worlds and broke a world record from the B session. I don't know how to think about that. It's kind of a dick move, right? It's kind of a move. It's kind of like an arrogant move, in my opinion, to be like, why don't you perform in the A session with everybody else, give your competitors the benefit of competing against you, which is a sportsman-like thing to do, and then give the fans the opportunity to watch you perform. Instead, it's like a very selfish thing to like do it in the B session for whatever reasons they chose to do that. You know, was it like, okay, maybe he went there because it's whatever and he's just doing a total, but he broke a world record. So like, he obviously knew he was going to lift well. Then you fast forward to a year later in Riyadh, and he does the same thing. He does it from the C session. In Riyadh, he was an 89 kilo lifter. He snatched 159 and clean and jerk 209, I think. Had he done one more snatch, a little over 160, he probably would have qualified for the Olympics as an 89.
Wow.
Yeah. So he didn't. He only did the one lift, and he only did the number to get the world record, but he did from the C session, which again is like a question of like, what are you doing? Are you doing this to like make a mockery of it for everybody else? Like, you don't belong in that session. No one could argue that you belong in that session. You should have been in the A session. You should have been competing against, even if you smashed everybody, you should have been competing against the people that are at the highest level in your weight class. When you don't do that, you don't give anyone else a chance to, you know, to test themselves against the best. Fast forward again, we're a year after that, and it's 8 months after that, and we're at the World Cup, and now he's in the A session. And he shows up and performed, unfortunately didn't snatch super well.
Yeah.
And then needs the 206 clean and jerk to win it. Takes it as opener and does what he normally does, which is kind of rush through things. And normally he makes lifts. This time he didn't. He missed it. He drove it a little bit forward and he couldn't get under it. And you're thinking, okay, he'll make that. He just made one mistake, gets a second shot at it. All he needs is this 206 clean and jerk. So, you know, whatever. He goes and he, you know, takes a seat on the stairs. 35 seconds later, hops up and goes and takes the lift again. And before I tell you, obviously, you know, you can watch it, but like before I kind of reveal what I saw in those moments is, let's look at Rizki's performance. Rizki goes in, he makes a 164 snatch, which is a mega huge lift for him. but he looked like somebody who was trying to win the competition more than somebody who was trying to just expected to win. Rizky's lifts and his attempt selection were designed to set him up to break the world record, which would give him the total he needed to qualify. 164, 201. He took his third clean and jerk attempt at 203, which is just 2 kilos more, which is super smart tactically, because it would have forced Rahmat to 208 if he was successful, right? So like he was thinking, and they were playing the game of a smart weightlifter, which is make all the lifts you can, move your total up as high as you can, and leave it in the hands of the other competitor to miss. Had he made the 203, it would have been brutal. That would have been really hard for Rahmat to beat. Going back to Rahmat now, he's up and he's got 206 on the bar for a second attempt. He needs this. He takes 35 seconds rest. He sits on the stairs. He gets right back up. He goes over the bar, cleans it. It's fucking brutal. It's a terrible clean. And like he stumbles forward to get up. The bar slides off his chest. Everybody in the audience, everyone sitting there, myself, Seb, anyone who's ever done a clean and jerk that's super hard could look in this man's eyes, and you can see it. Yeah. It's the Schrodinger's barbell. if he doesn't jerk it, unless he tries to jerk the weight, he hasn't yet failed to qualify. He's still eligible for the Olympics. Right? He hasn't missed the lift yet, and he could make it. So you can watch him. You can see it in his eyes. Everybody knows that he knows he's going to miss this jerk. And it's the most brutal and painful thing to watch. You can just see it, like he's going to miss this jerk. Well, we all know he's going to miss, and he knows he's going to miss. And that's it. That means it's over. And it's like this fucking moment of like, man, this is awful. On the off chance, some random chance or some incredible heroic event, he makes this jerk. It would have been one of the most incredible, like, not underdog stories, but incredible, like, holy shit, that's the best lift of the century. Like, he needed that lift and he was grinding through it. Of course, he misses, right? And it's just like, then you start asking yourself, like, why did he do that? Why didn't he take an extra minute in the back? Why didn't they, why did he sit on the stairs? Like, why didn't he go in the back room and take a minute and come out at 30 seconds? Like, all this stuff. And then it just starts to look like, man, the whole quad, like everything they did. Now you start looking at it from this other perspective of like, initially you're looking at it like, oh, damn, he's just so good. He does whatever he wants. Now you're looking at it like, oh, those choices all seem kind of like just bad choices. Like, why do all these things going into it? Why not be a lifter who's like battling back and forth with everybody? Why not take all your attempts? Why not leave yourself a secondary option of like, hey, qualify in the 89s just in case. Maybe you get hurt and somebody passes you. Maybe Rizky breaks the world record and beats you. Like, but now you're looking at it as like one of the most talented lifters by far. A great dude, fantastic. All these things are true. And did they play themselves? Like, they just make a lot of really subpar choices. If you look at every choice they made, they all look like not great choices, which to me is like, that's indicative of like just, the amateur version of lifting. It's like sad to watch. So I don't know what your thoughts are, but like, I was just like, yeah, as a coach, you look at it and you're just like frustrated because you're like, man, I would be so angry at myself as a coach if I let a lot of those little choices add up to a failure in the end. I'd also look at it from the athlete perspective and be like, fuck, like I know exactly how that feels. Like you're just ready to go. You take the 30 seconds, you go for it. Like he lifted so well the whole quad, but then one bad meet, and then as a fan, you're just like, damn, that's rough. That's rough.
Yeah. I thought that was a great analysis and breakdown. Super insightful. And I think it connects the dots for a lot of people who maybe have just been watching from the outside. They're going to go back. They're going to go on Weightlifting House TV. They're going to watch the full session. They're going to go back and look at prior performances. and then kind of see exactly what you're talking about. So I think it paints a really clear picture of, this duel between the two. So what are you thinking after the World Cup? How are you feeling about the Olympics, knowing who's going and who's not is somewhat?
The Olympics is going to be a very much boring meet in reality, which it usually is. It's pretty obvious who's going to win because this meet was a better competition than the Olympics will be because you had every person competing. Two people in some countries, right? Like the 73 battle is going to come down to Rizki versus Shi Jiang. And Shi Jiang is kind of probably not going to lift his best, right? It's just likely that, Rizki probably will beat him. And they generally are more conservative, right? So the Olympics is like no one wants to bomb out. Bombing at the Olympics is the worst thing you can do because there's retests of Olympic samples. So like you might be third or fourth, but like retest might bump you up and then you got a medal. It's not as rewarding to get it 8 years afterward, but still it's a thing. So I would say like the ultimate reality here is that the Olympics as a competition is going to be much less exciting, much more predictable. There'll be maybe some upsets here and there, but like most of it's going to be pretty straightforward. The sort of intensity of the fight, I think, will be less than it was at the World Cup. I do think it'll be a little more exciting because we'll have the supers back. So Lasha's going to go, Gore's going to go. That battle, I think, has yet to play out where those guys really go for it. But again, it's the Olympics, so maybe everybody's going to, dial back on what they can get away with. It's just a very different organization. It's a very different situation. So I think it'll be good. I just think, it's largely going to be like less massive and exciting than like the World Cup is or was.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be interesting. It's always cool to see. I mean, the World Cup is really cool because you see battles that are pretty much life and death. Or, Olympics or not. And you see, I always love when you see battles that you wouldn't have anticipated, or you see people return who haven't been in the game for a while, or you see people come out of nowhere. And I think like that unexpected aspect of it, and like the strange combination of people competing in certain weight classes, makes it a lot of fun. So it'd be cool to see the roster on the men's and women's side for the Olympics, see who's competing and who's not, and then that's going to roll into another quad, and it'll kind of be like really relaxed at first, but it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out.
Yeah. I think that is one of those things where the new quad, it will come out and will be a big short, like resorting of everything. Like there's just so many people that are going to retire, Kate Vibert's retiring. Probably a lot of the USA team will retire. A lot of foreign lifters are going to retire. There's just going to be so much turnover. So the next quad will be, probably pretty weak to start, and then it'll get better. It'll get better as it goes. But it's going to be one of those like pretty, like sort of we need to find the new heroes, the next breed. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be good. No matter what, it's good weightlifting. It's getting better. Things are coming up. So I'm excited for all that. It's exciting to watch. Seb and I are probably going to do something for the Olympics in the UK, some kind of like, lift companion type thing where we'll do some kind of, podcast style or roundtable discussion style watching the Olympic session. But we can't do a commentary on it. And we haven't heard from like NBC as to like whether or not they're going to hire us to do it. That would be cool. That'd be awesome. Is that they like, they bring us out there, put us up in some cool hotel, and that'd be like the coolest thing. But I don't think that'll happen. So you'll probably be stuck with commentary from who knows, maybe like a just regular broadcaster, maybe Michaela Breeze. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, speaking for everyone else, we'd love to have you and Seb commentate and be the voice of the Olympic Games. But again, I guess we'll see how that pans out.
Yeah.
I thought this was a fantastic episode. I think we had a lot of great training talk about tapering and peaking. We obviously covered the World Cup, some great battles. You kind of did a deep dive analysis of the 73 class, which was really cool. And
Yeah.
we kind of rounded it out with a lot of question marks as to what the Olympics will look like and what post-Olympics will look like in weightlifting.
Yeah. And just sort of for everybody there too, like I think maybe in the mentorship group, we should do a little more of a deep dive on tactics and what people did. Because I think as a coach, that's helpful. I think there's a lot to go into how you prepare somebody, how you train for it. But yeah, there's so many case studies from the World Cup we could use. So maybe that's something we should try and do in the mentorship group this week or next week, as far as like just, let's break down a performance and, discuss that and go from there. But yeah, very cool. I think that's probably it from myself and Josh Gibson, unless you want to throw something else in there. We can wrap this guy up.
We just mentioned the title sponsor, Weightlifting AI.
Yep.
If you're looking for a training plan, a training program that's adaptable, individualized, and responsive, that's weightlifting.ai. You go check that out. I think if you want remote coaching, you mentioned it, they can reach out to yourself or myself. That's teamada.com. Everything is everywhere. You just look in the description and you'll generally find it. But that's it for me.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, we will see you guys next time on the Coachlogik podcast. And that's it. We're out.